What happens when a simple question, asked by a young girl, cuts through the noise of politics and sparks a deeply personal revelation from one of the most powerful figures in the world? Well, that's exactly what happened when an 8-year-old named Lily asked Donald Trump a question about God, one that left the crowd in stunned silence and brought Trump to open up in a way no one expected. It was an evening like no other in Shreveport, Louisiana. The church fellowship hall, typically home to Sunday potlucks and Bible studies, was buzzing with energy as Donald Trump stood at the front of the room. His usual boisterous energy was tempered tonight. He was subdued, more reflective than usual. The crowd, a mix of curious locals, families, and retirees, had gathered to hear him speak, but there was one person in the room who stood out. 8-year-old Lily, dressed in her best Sunday dress and clutching a well-worn Bible passed down from her late grandmother, was about to ask a question that would leave an indelible mark on the evening. Her mother, sitting beside her, had whispered, "You can ask him, but only if you're brave enough and if you really mean it." Lily nodded, her heart pounding as she had rehearsed the question over and over in her mind for weeks, knowing it wasn't just a curious inquiry, it was a question that weighed on her soul. The evening unfolded in typical fashion, with Trump speaking about his usual topics, policies, achievements, and his vision for the future. The crowd clapped and nodded in agreement, but the energy in the room was different. This wasn't a typical rally. Lily sat quietly, gripping the edges of her Bible, her small hands tightening with each passing minute. She was nervous, but when her mother gave her a subtle nudge, Lily knew it was her moment. With wobbly legs, she stood up, her heart racing so loudly that it seemed like the entire room could hear it. As she made her way to the front, the murmurs of the crowd softened. Everyone noticed the little girl with the oversized Bible. Her presence was felt, and the room seemed to hold its breath as she took her turn. Trump looked down at her, his usual confident demeanor softening as he gave her a gentle smile. "And what's your question, young lady?" he asked, his voice surprisingly calm. Lily swallowed hard, gripping her Bible so tightly that her knuckles turned white. With a voice that trembled but refused to break, she asked, "Mr. Trump, what does God mean to you?" The room went silent. The question hung in the air, heavier than anyone could have anticipated. For a man known for his rapid-fire, confident answers, this pause was a stark contrast. He stared at Lily for what seemed like an eternity, his usual bravado replaced by something more vulnerable, almost contemplative. For a moment, he didn't respond. His gaze shifted to the Bible in her hands, and something in his demeanor changed. His fingers gripped the edge of the podium as he began to speak, his voice quieter than usual. "That's a big question," Trump began, the words slower, more deliberate. "It's not one I've always had the answer to." The crowd, stunned by his honesty, waited in hushed silence. He continued, sharing something deeply personal. "When I was about your age, I had a lot of questions about God too. My parents would take me to church every Sunday. I remember sitting in those pews, staring at the stained glass windows, wondering if God was even listening to me." A chuckle rippled through the room, a fleeting moment of lightness, but Lily remained still, her eyes fixed on him, waiting for the deeper answer she had been searching for. Trump leaned in, his voice growing softer. "When I got older, life threw a lot of challenges my way," he admitted. "I faced losses, failures, and moments where I wasn't sure if I could keep going. And in those times, I didn't always feel like God was with me. Sometimes I was angry at him. Other times, I thought maybe he'd given up on me altogether." The room was captivated. This wasn't the polished politician they were used to seeing. This was a man laying bare his doubts, his struggles, and his faith. "But I'll tell you this," Trump said, his voice firming once more. "Even in my worst moments, when I thought I was alone, I realized that faith isn't about always having the answers. It's about believing that even when you don't see the whole picture, there's a reason, a purpose, that's greater than any of us." Lily, who had been holding her breath through every word, slowly let it out as tears welled in her eyes. She clutched the Bible tighter to her chest, its pages a symbol of her own faith and her grandmother's memory. Trump's words seemed to penetrate the very soul of the room. "And God," he said, his voice softer now, "to me, is that purpose. He's the reminder that even when we fall, even when we fail, we're not done. He's the one who keeps telling us to climb the ladder, even when it feels like it's going to break." Lily's tears began to fall, quietly at first, then more freely as the weight of his words settled over her. The crowd began to murmur, sensing that something extraordinary was happening in that moment, something that transcended politics and policy. As Trump noticed Lily's tears, he stepped away from the podium, his face softened by something rare for him, a moment of quiet understanding. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's a beautiful name," Trump said with a faint smile. "You know, Lily, sometimes the simplest questions are the hardest ones to answer. And sometimes, those questions remind us of what really matters." The room was still, every eye on Lily, every heart in the room connected by the truth shared by both the girl and the man standing before her. Trump smiled, then addressed the crowd one last time. "This little girl just asked a question that most adults are too afraid to ask. What does God mean to us?" It's not an easy question because it makes us look inward, face our fears, our doubts, and our flaws. But the truth is, that's what makes it so powerful. The room burst into applause, but it wasn't just for Trump. It was for the moment itself, the power of Lily's courage and the sincerity of Trump's response. For once, politics took a backseat, and faith, humanity, and connection were at the forefront. As the crowd cheered, Trump turned back to Lily. "You've got more courage than most people twice your age. Don't ever lose that." Lily, her heart full, wiped her tears and smiled. Her mother embraced her, and the room around them buzzed with the energy of something transformed. A simple question had sparked a conversation that touched the lives of everyone there. This story isn't just about faith or politics. It's about the bravery to ask the tough questions, the vulnerability to seek answers, and the power of sharing our human experience. If you found this story moving, take a moment to reflect on your own faith, and remember, sometimes the most important answers come when we ask the questions that matter most. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire.